Welcome to Inspiring Working Lives, the Morgan Hunt podcast where we explore public sector leadership journeys. From honest chats about career highs and lows, to lessons and wisdom to inspire the next generation of leaders that will shape our society.
Welcome to the Morgan Hunt Inspiring Working Lives podcast. My guest today is Genevieve Edwards, Chief Executive of Bowel Cancer UK. Genevieve Edwards has been Chief Executive of Bowel Cancer UK since February 2020. With more than 2 decades of leadership experience in the voluntary and health sectors, Genevieve brings a strong track record in strategy, influencing, communications and policy. Prior to joining Bowel Cancer UK, she was Executive Director of External Affairs and Nations at the MS Society, where she led external relations, public affairs and national engagement functions. Earlier in her career, she held senior roles in other health and social organisations, including UK Director of Policy, Partnerships and Communications at Mary Stopes International, various director-level roles including communications, fundraising, health improvement at Terence Higgins Trust, and former trustee of the Neurological Alliance. Under her leadership, Bowel Cancer UK has emphasised early diagnosis, campaigning on policy and working to reduce the stigma around discussing bowel health. Genevieve is passionate about removing barriers to care, accelerating diagnostic access and ensuring voices of patients and carers are at the heart of decision making. Genevieve, thank you so much for coming to see us at Morgan Hunt today.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Me too. Okay, our first question here is always about your childhood. How was your childhood and did you have career aspirations as a young person?
I did. So I grew up in the Peak District in a small village. Learned a lot about wildflowers and I had a lovely childhood. But I wanted to be a pilot. And back then the RAF didn't let women fly. So that was kind of an early lesson really, and you don't always get what you want. And they've changed that now, by the way. So any women listening who'd like to be a pilot, go for it.
Go for it, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't. I couldn't do that. So then I started thinking about things I enjoyed at school. And I really loved communicating, writing, reading, all of those sorts of things, which led me almost by accident into a career in communications. And I first thought I'd really like to be a journalist, and that would have been great, but I started to worry about whether I'd got the right personal qualities to do what journalists do, and it's a very particular skill. Going and talking to strangers and asking questions, perhaps at very difficult times of their lives. I loved the investigation side of it and the research and so on, but I thought maybe communications was better suited for me. And I ended up via a post-university stint in temping in a marketing team in Manchester. I ended up in an interview with a PR agency, and very small. And one of the questions they asked me was, would you like a coffee? Obviously, you got me one here. And I said, yeah, I'd love a black coffee, please. And the guy who owned the agency went to the door and just said to the rest of the team, she drinks black coffee. And that was that. And the second question was, do you know the question between advertising, marketing and PR? And I said, no, not really. And I got the job anyway. And it was basically because I drank black coffee. So
it's an amazing selection technique. Yes.
Yeah. I know it was about 2 weeks in that they discovered I didn't know how to type either, but they never asked that question. So,
Wonderful. So you start this life in PR?
Yes.
Yes, specifically, and communications. And Who were you doing PR and communications on behalf of?
So back then it was professional firms. So there were lawyers, accountants, and a firm of average adjusters. And I'd never heard of average adjusting. I just assumed they weren't that good at it. And it was really interesting, actually. And actually, while I was working with them on launching 2 books, one called The Law of Average, and I got really into it, and they asked if I'd be interested in working for them. And that was a little sliding door moment, and I didn't go down that path because I thought that's not where my heart lies. And then over Christmas, a friend of mine who was working for a new charity that had started up called the Romanian Orphanage Trust, and they'd had an appeal and been overwhelmed with post. So over Christmas I went in to help them open the post, just on a voluntary basis. And then I ended up setting up their press office for them, and that was my first job in the voluntary sector, and I found my home, really, which was the voluntary sector. But it could have been a very different story if I'd gone to work for the average adjusters.
Yes, indeed, yeah. But you said something quite interesting there. You said it wasn't where my heart lies. So did you have a sense that you wanted to do a different role other than sort of average adjusting?
Yes, and there were some great stories there too, but it was, for me, it was about people and making, how we could make a difference. So I started out working for an international children's charity, the Romanian Orphanage Trust, and I spent the next decade or so working in domestic and international children's charities, including some very big ones, and obviously that small one when I started. And it was that really that gave me the passion for the voluntary sector, just seeing how inventive the charity sector is, how much we do on lengths of string and £2.50, and how that early commitment to every single pound that's donated to the charity, wringing every last drop of value out of it for your beneficiaries. And I saw that time and time again throughout my career, that people go above and beyond, and they make remarkable things happen with very little.
It is wonderful, isn't it? And I suppose that first experience of a charity, the Romanian orphanages,
yes.
I guess that was after the Ceausescu regime fell apart. And it was a big story, wasn't it?
It was just after the fall of Ceausescu, and I remember going to Romania and going to visit those orphanages, and in the capital seeing the bullet holes in the walls where Ceausescu fell, not that place literally, but where the sort of the fighting was happening, and then seeing those children, some of them babies, in those orphanages, and thinking it seemed like a really hopeless position, because for most of them they weren't orphans. They did have families that just couldn't afford to keep them, couldn't afford to bring them up, and that charity was doing what it could to try and help in very difficult circumstances. And actually, if you think back, that was maybe the first time a human catastrophe had happened that was close enough. The British public is incredibly generous, and normally these things happen in faraway lands, and you give money and you support the big charities who are helping. But this is the first time that people could get in their car and drive there, or get in a van and take things, and they did it. I saw that. It was extraordinary.
Yes, you're right. It would have piqued interest, the unfairness of it, the injustice of how those children were treated.
Yeah.
And it must have been quite wonderful, actually, just to see that response. And sometimes you're running around London, you're thinking people don't care that much at all about anything, but then at these times people really do respond.
Yes, people did, and it was remarkable, and I was very privileged to go there and to meet the people who were on the ground running those orphanages, who were doing the best for the children, and those children, some of whom I'll never forget. They stay with you for life. And the most extraordinary, I remember one orphanage we went into right up near the Russian border, and our team that were working in there had been there for a long time, and then they discovered there was an additional floor, and that was where the babies with HIV were.
Right.
And that was heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking. And then, of course, subsequently, I did spend 11 years working in HIV with the Terence Higgins Trust. So it's funny how there are threads there, you know. But it was an extraordinary response from the public, and a small charity set up doing remarkable things. I set up a press office, never having worked in one before. And before we knew it, we had the Radio 1 stamp appeal. And I found myself on Simon Mayer's breakfast show, 10 million people audience, my very first media interview. And that, again, scary, but you get the opportunity. You can say no and regret it, or you can go for it and see what happens. And it was amazing.
So which you kind of found by chance, really, just to help out, and then you find yourself working for them.
Yes.
Was your heart captured by the charity sector at this stage?
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely. And my next role was at Save the Children. I went there as a temp, so I had a week temping in the HR team, and my job was to send out recruitment packs to people who were interested in working there, which incidentally taught me to touch type numbers. Useful.
Very, yes.
And all the postcodes.
Probably good at the average adjustment firm as well.
It would have been, yeah. And the HR department took me under their wing, and because they booked the temps for the whole of the charity, it might be the overseas department needs a temp this week, or the corporate fundraising team do, or whatever it was. And what an amazing induction that was, because I got to work all over the charity and see different aspects of it. I ran the photo library when the photo librarian was on holiday and things like that. And I remember somebody saying once, "Oh, we need this telex sending to Tibet, can anyone do it?" And I was like, hand up straight away. Yes, I'll do it. It's like, I thought the most glamorous. Wow, Tibet, a telex. Of course, I had never even seen a telex machine. In fact, it's the only time I ever saw one. And then I had to figure it out, but I wasn't going to admit that. And I went along, and somebody kind of showed me how to turn the on button on, and we did it, But it was just amazing, the opportunities there. And after temping for a while, I got offered a job in the regional fundraising team. Had about 20,000 fundraising volunteers, and I was a comms officer there. And then it was the 75th birthday of the charity coming along, and I got a job working with the director who was running that campaign, that whole 75th anniversary campaign. While I was there, extraordinary opportunities I had. I ended up in Rwanda with 3 days' notice, coordinating, helping to coordinate what was going on at the time, and all the camps were closing in what was then Tanzania and Zaire, and refugees coming back into the country. Again, I'd never imagined doing anything like that in my life, but one of those things where there was a problem, we weren't getting information out because the teams were too busy, and I stuck my hand up and said, well, shall I do that then? And they said, yes, Thursday on a plane. So that was that. And again, I had the most amazing few weeks there working with the team and seeing quite literally what they did with bits of string, actually, and parcel tape tags to keep children safe and with their families. So they undertook these massive journeys.
In terms of career development, putting your hand up is a good idea.
That's something, when I look back on my career, I think those sliding door moments have been where I've stuck my hand up and said, shall I do that? And I'm not naturally sort of outgoing, gregarious sort of person. I'm a bit more reserved. So it takes, you have to have a bit of, make yourself do it. Because what's the worst that can happen? Somebody will say, it's okay, thanks.
Yeah.
We've got it covered. But then they might say yes, and then who knows, what will come out of that. And some of the best moments, really, or the most exciting experiences I've had or been lucky enough to have come off the back of that. So I'd give that as a piece of advice to anyone, is don't be afraid to say, shall I do that? Because they might just say yes, and who knows where that'll take you.
Exactly. And through all these experiences, you're pulling together a kit bag of different scenarios and knowledge and understanding of difficult situations and how to handle them.
Yes.
Yeah.
And actually, in a communications career, which is what certainly where I started my career, it's really helpful because if you're working in a press office, your job is to answer calls from journalists, and they're going to ask you questions, and you need to be able to think fast and think quickly sometimes. And sometimes you have to handle a crisis situation, and again, you need to be able to have a cool head, think fast, and I know there's a lot of other things you need to do as well, like, make sure you're not speculating, you're commenting on what you know to be true rather than, some speculation. There's lots of other things, we won't go there. But it is really helpful.
Well, I guess it really is, because you've got to be concise, you've got to get the message across. And I guess there's got to be a call to action in terms of your audience, in terms of who you're trying to engage with the project.
And I think another thing I learned in my time at Save the Children was the importance of storytelling and it's true for leadership as well. You have to bring people with you. And another light bulb moment I had was when I was brushing my teeth, getting ready for work, listening to the radio. And radio is a very personal medium because you're in people's homes, you're in their cars, you're with them while they're getting ready for work or putting their children to bed or whatever it is. So you think about this, how you're going to engage them and how you're going to make them care. So I was listening to it was an interview about a gap in the food aid pipeline, and this was an international unfolding disaster, and the person who's being interviewed didn't catch his name, couldn't tell you the name of the organisation that he was working for. I can't really think of any of the, how much the gap was, or any of the facts that he gave about this problem, but he said this is why it matters. He said winter's coming and those villages will be closed off and inaccessible because they'll be snowed in. And if we don't get that food pipeline to them in time before winter comes, I, for one, will not walk through those villages in the spring when it thaws and see them and see what's happened to them. And it was so powerful. You can probably tell, now it makes me think, gosh, that I've never forgotten. And in that moment, I was, in my mind's eye, walking through those villages. And I thought, immediately you think, gosh, no, this is really important. It's urgent. Governments must act. And it's the power of that story and the way he told it. And I think, again, working in the voluntary sector, you are privileged to meet remarkable people doing extraordinary things with very little resources. And it's, it's our role to be able to be really good storytellers, to be good advocates, to make people care.
Yes, yeah. And to highlight these issues in a world full of issues, I guess. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so where did your career lead you from Save the Children?
I worked at a large domestic children's charity called NCH Action for Children, and it was there that I started to hone my crisis management skills a little, shall we say. People old enough might remember the North Wales Child Abuse Inquiry, and it was looking at children's homes and how people had been in some of the homes, some of the people who'd worked there had been abusing the children who were there. And of course, people move around in jobs, and what started in North Wales became an inquiry in other parts of the country, and inevitably took in some of the homes that the charity I worked with had run back in the day. So these were historical allegations, but you were then in a position where people were being brought to court and going through the court system. And so, again, this is something very, very new for me, and how you respond to that, and sitting in court, hearing the evidence from people, seeing those convictions, and you go into the voluntary sector, you don't expect that you'll be in a position where great harm has been done to children under the watch of the charity that you're working with. And it was very different times back then in terms of safeguard. We've come an awful long way, and we've learned an awful lot about that. But that was a whole new area for me. And again, seeing on the more positive side the work that the charity was doing to end youth homelessness. But this was back when the Blair government came into power, and we were looking at lots of different projects going on around the country in that area. Really inspiring work, really inspiring. But needed to shine a spotlight because, back in '97, people shouldn't be leaving care and becoming homeless. And I don't think we've cracked that nut.
No. Okay. So crisis management then, I suppose there's parts of that job which must live with you today in terms of how you operate. What were the particular things you pulled out of that in terms of dealing with trouble when it arises?
Well, the first thing really is to be prepared, because when you find yourself in a crisis, that's not the time to make a plan, basically. You need to have thought this through in advance and know who's going to do what. You don't want to look like, everybody's running around. So you do need to make, and I can think of 2 or 3 occasions in my career where something's blown up out of nowhere, really takes you by surprise. And if you're not prepared, it can have legs before you know it and run away from you. So first thing is to be prepared, and also know who's going to do what in the event of a crisis, and think through what kind of crisis it might be. Is it something that is outside your control? Is it something that's gone wrong in your organisation? Is it a misconception that's blown out of proportion externally, and you need to get on top of that? And then I think you have to be really clear about how you're communicating and to who, and think that through and be really intentional. My advice would be don't say anything that's not true. You have to be trustworthy, and if an organisation has found itself, it's made a mistake or it's in the wrong in some way, then you have to sit down and think about how you're going to communicate that, how it happened, what you're going to do as a result. You see, don't you, from time to time, when people try to wriggle off the hook or cover it up, such a bad idea.
Exactly. Yeah. A lot of politicians could take this advice from you. Yes. Okay. And then from NCH, where did you move on to next?
So at this point, I went into consultancy for a year. There was a public sector consultancy, quite a big group, doing lots of different things, and mine was the public sector bit. And I did things like I launched a police recruitment campaign, I ran the NHS cancer screening programme's press office, launched a mental health campaign, really, really interesting things, and also getting a glimpse of what it's like to work agency side as well. It teaches you a lot about evaluation, teaches you a lot about time, account management, that sort of thing. So that was a really, really interesting time in my life. Also, they gave me a BlackBerry. And most people listening to this podcast probably won't know what one of those is, but it was cutting edge back then. And in the voluntary sector, we didn't really have that level of kit, I suppose. So that was exciting. But then, while I was there, a job came up at the Terence Higgins Trust, the HIV and sexual health charity, as head of marketing and PR, and I leapt at it. Absolutely leapt at it, and to my great surprise, they gave me the job. And And actually, I had lunch at the weekend with someone who was on that interview panel,
Right.
and the former chief executive. So that was great, and I was there for 11 years. And by the time I ended, I was director of fundraising, communications, and health improvement. So during that 11 years, every time I thought I was on top of my brief, the chief exec would slide something else across the table to me and say, well, handle this or manage that. And so I was really lucky in that I could grow within that organisation during that period of time.
Right, that's interesting. So a new challenge was arriving on a regular basis. Is that one of the reasons you stayed there for a significant time, 11 years?
Part of the reason, yes.
Yeah.
But also because it was such a compelling issue. And it's a health issue, yes, for sure, but it also, in my mind, was a human rights issue as well. And not just my mind, obviously. And I think at that time, I've always, not always, but over the years I've sort of developed a kind of a three-prong sort of thing about, is this going to work for me, this job? So,
right.
Or is it working for me? So the three questions I ask myself is, do I have influence? Because without it, it's quite difficult to get things done. Am I learning? And that one is on me. I don't expect an organisation. I mean, it's lovely if you've got a nice learning and development budget that an organisation can support you with, but there's an awful lot that you can and should do for yourself to keep learning. So, am I learning? And then the third element is, am I making a difference? And there are times when you might go into an organisation and a role and all of those stars line up, and then, over time, think priorities might change, leadership might change, lots of things may change, you yourself may change, and then, and it's not working quite well anymore. So those are the three things I usually ask myself. And at Terence Higgins Trust, I learned so much over that period of time. I had a great deal of fun doing it. Really, worked with people with whom, I just admired so much and still do. And yeah, I'm proud of being able to be part of that team. It was a real highlight in my career, and I met some amazing people. Well, one of him got played by Dominic West in a film. So
yeah. Who was that? Can I ask?
He was a volunteer on our reception.
Yeah.
But no, it was an amazing charity, and still is an amazing charity, and it was a privilege to be part of it.
This episode is brought to you by Morgan Hunt, a public sector recruitment agency with over 30 years of experience. Whether you're looking for your next role or growing your team, we match purpose-driven people with organisations making a real difference. Visit morganhunt.com to find out how Morgan Hunt inspires working lives.
That's great to have that framework of three key questions. I think that will benefit a lot of people who are wondering whether they should stay in a role or, understand the reasons why they are staying in a role.
Yes.
You mentioned at the start of your Terence Higgins experience that you were really excited about this role. It was something you were... What was the driver behind that? Why were you so keen to get it?
The issue itself, really, it felt like such a stigmatised area. It really, I really wanted to get stuck in. I'd volunteered actually for them at an event previously, and then when I went to the interview in their offices on Gray's Inn Road, and I got taken downstairs into the basement past all the kind of carcasses of old computers that had been sort of gone there to die, and and I'd gone from this world in the consultancy where everything was really rather nice.
Yes.
And I went down into the basement for this interview, And I sort of a bit felt like coming home in a way. I thought back into the voluntary sector, you know, and you know, where we don't have the money to spend on, you know, nice carpets and blackberries, and nor should we if we did. And straight away, the team. I really enjoyed working with the team, and you know, in the interviews, not often you come away from an interview going, really want to work with them. Yeah, really want to work with them. Yes. Yeah. Although I do remember in that interview there was one awful moment where I'd been asked a question and I found myself gazing up into the corner of the room for the answer. And you know, when you sort of you're thinking it through, and then you suddenly look down on yourself, and go, "What are you doing?" I was like.
No. She just said black coffee, please.
Yeah, black coffee, please. Yeah. So, but I got the job, and it was an amazing privilege to be there.
Great. Yeah. So quite a stint, 11 years, and then where did the road take you next?
Well, I had my eldest, and I thought at this point that when he was quite young, maybe I'd quite like to try consultancy, because I'd worked in the voluntary sector for quite a long time now, and I thought it might give me a little bit more flexibility when he was so young. But then fate had another idea, really. I was at a party conference, and political party conferences are all happening at the moment, aren't they? And I bumped into someone from Mary Stopes International and went for a coffee with her, and I ended up going to work there. So, and again, you know, that reproductive health, global, massive organisation, global organisation, doing some remarkable things. And you know, if you think that HIV and sexual health is quite a stigmatised area of healthcare, then so can reproductive and abortion be, very much so. So that took me into a whole completely different world. I was working in the UK division, but I worked with the global, with the global team as well, and it was a really interesting time, which actually drew Keir Starmer to our door.
Right. Okay.
Yes. We had a clinic in near the BT Tower in London. Yeah. And he had some complaints from his constituents. He is the MP for that area, so he came to see me about it, and that was really interesting. It was a really interesting time. I'll tell you about it sometime.
Did you know he was destined to be Prime Minister at this stage?
No, I didn't. But it was good. I was pleased to see him come talk to us about it.
Yeah,
and say,
it's good.
You know, this is. And it wasn't complaints about the charity, I should say. It was complaints about people who were complaining about the charity, basically. So,
right. Yes.
So it was different, but it was good for him to come along and find out what was going on.
Good. Okay. So you're kind of in this world now of more health-related charity work as such.
Yes.
Yeah, and then your next move is into
neurology.
Neurology.
Yes.
Right, yeah.
With the MS Society. And again, an area that people don't find easy to talk about.
No.
And it affects a lot of people in the UK. And one of the things that was really interesting about that role was looking at people's experience of healthcare depending on where they live. So how we could tackle the kind of variation in care that you would get just by dint of your postcode. And so that, again, that was fascinating. And the other thing that we did there was launch a really bold appeal. And I really admired the charity's vision here, because for people with remitting MS, then there was about a dozen treatments that you could take to help with that. But for people with progressive MS, there were no treatments at all. And for lots of people with remitting MS, they will go on to develop progressive MS. Right. And We just didn't think this was good enough. And so we launched a £100 million appeal to find treatments over a defined period of time by running the first multi-arm clinical trial in neurology, and it was really, really exciting. But that's where the storytelling came back in again, because I've just summarised it. I had no idea if that sounded interesting or not, probably not. So how do you tell that story in a way that's really compelling, that's really, and it combines a sense of urgency with a solution? You know, this is an injustice, this shouldn't be the case, but if we can raise this amount of money in that period of time, we can fix it. So it was great to be part of that appeal, the strategy for launching it, and to see, you know, looking at the organisation now, seeing what they're doing with it. So it was an exciting time.
But it must be so satisfying to have that problem, identify that problem, and then through the gift of words and storytelling to be able to launch something that generates all that money to drive better outcomes and a better conclusion for people.
Yes, absolutely. And Theresa May was Prime Minister then, and it was a privilege to introduce to her one of the scientists that was really spearheading work in this area, and to remind him that he'd said, and you know, if you'd asked me 15 years ago whether we could do this, I would have said, you know, I'm at base camp and I can't even see the top of the mountain. And he said, if you ask me now, I could tell you, well, I can see the path and I know we're going to get there. So it, again, you know, it was a lovely way of just bringing it to life, that this was possible. It was absolutely possible. And while I was there, also we became the first charity to call for the legalisation of cannabis for medicinal use. And again, this was something that, from an organisation's point of view, you don't do lightly. So we looked at the evidence. Is the evidence there that it can help people with MS? And it was. And we consulted with the scientific clinical community to back that up. We consulted with the MS community. What did people think on this issue? And they felt really strongly about it, actually, that it should be an option for them. And then we thought, what's the stakeholder management we'd need to do on this? And we did a really thorough piece. And we came to the conclusion, with strong support from the community, very strong evidence that it could be beneficial. It would be wrong for us as an organisation not to change our position and our policy, even though the easy thing to do would be to just keep your head down and carry on as you were. So we prepared really thoroughly. This could, you know, it could be wrongly perceived, it could go well, but we wanted to prepare incredibly thoroughly. I think the press team probably had a 52-page Q&A document, and, you know, just in case. We thought of every single angle, you know, done our stakeholder management really thoroughly. And I remember the night before we launched it, I thought I'll just call my mother and just let her know, because, you know, throughout my career I've, you know, pop up on BBC News talking about condoms or on this, like that, you know, always give her a heads up before. And this time it was, you know, it was drugs. Yeah. And she was busy turning a cupboard out, and I explained to her, you know, the process we'd been through, and she was like, yes, you know, it all sounds very sensible, you know, but I'm turning this cupboard out and Dot's coming round for a cup of tea, so I must get on. And I thought, we're going to have no problems with this, you know.
Yes,
I mean,
yeah.
And it's one of those things where I think the public was way ahead of perhaps where Parliament was, politicians were.
Yes.
And so we were able to make the case, and within a few weeks, actually, the Home Secretary had agreed to legalise it for medicinal use, for tremors for MS, for, I think, nausea and pain for breast cancer as well. And so, for, you know, a limited limited use, but we were successful with the campaign. And I think, that again, it just shows, the voluntary sector is really powerful, can be really powerful. It's that purpose and being guided by the needs of your beneficiaries, and you take their views and their needs, and you use that for your decision making, and you don't go far wrong.
Okay, so Genevieve, throughout this conversation you've documented these different challenges that you've been faced with in different roles, etc. When you have one of those challenges and you go through the whole process and you come out triumphantly having significantly created change that's made the world a better place, do you celebrate? How does it manifest itself within the organisation? Do you all go crazy for 5 minutes or?
I think, with that one we did.
Yeah.
For sure, we were so delighted. I think often in the voluntary sector, you are quick to move on. Kind of what's the next thing that needs our attention and our help. So it is important, I think, when you're in leadership positions, is to just take those moments and say, look what we achieved together, and to celebrate it, because it's so important. And otherwise, I see today teams are kind of race on to the next thing and the next thing. It's like, no, hold on a minute, look what we did. And yeah, that is really important.
And I guess through that pause you can almost create a wave of adrenaline to take you to the next challenge.
Yes.
Yeah.
Momentum is really important, but also evaluation and learning, and learning from what you did well and taking heart from that, but also what didn't go quite so well. And it's important to learn from all of that. And so I think when you stop and think about it, I'm just in a position where Bowel Cancer UK is just literally a couple of weeks ago, I was at an award ceremony where we won an award for our partnership with Andrex, and it's a wonderful position to be in, and you think about the change that you're making because of those things, and to have that moment to celebrate. But it doesn't have to be about awards, and it shouldn't just be about awards. It should be about recognising the everyday things that people are doing that are making a difference, and making sure you celebrate those.
Yes, yeah. And a great reason to work in the charity sector as well, when these fundamental things are changed for the better.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But I think it's also really important that people feel able to try things, and that you recognise that they may not all work. So, because if you don't take any risks at all, and nothing moves forward. So I think if teams, if somebody comes to us with a good idea, or comes to me with a good idea and says, can I try that? Of course you manage risk as much as you can, but it has to be okay for things not to work too. And for people to understand that you're not going to turn around and point a finger at them and go, well, I'm blaming you for that.
Yeah.
You've got to feel able to try stuff and learn from it as well. That's really important.
Yes. Okay, so I guess we're building up to the time in your career where this opportunity comes around for a CEO position.
Yes.
Is that right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. What made you go for the big job?
I was keen to. I really wanted to take the next step, and to lead an organisation, and I was looking for the right opportunity. And I'll be really honest with you, I went for a role, I didn't get it. I got some great feedback from that, and I learned so much from the feedback on that I think that I credit that feedback with helping me to get the role I did. And so I'd say to anyone, if you're not going to land every job you go for, but what you can do is take learning from it, learning from how you prepared, learning from how you handled, whatever that interview process might have been, and always get feedback from why. Sometimes you're just unlucky. There was somebody else showed up and they had something they were looking for, and they didn't know what they were looking for until they saw it in someone else. And you can't do anything about that, but there are bits that you can do something about, and if you get that feedback, then you can work with it. So that was really, really helpful for me. I then went for another role, which I did get, but during the course of the process I thought, actually, do you know what, I don't think this is quite right for me. And then the role at Bowel Cancer UK came along, and it's that instant moment, I felt I really, 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 really want that job. And a couple of days later, I got a call from a headhunter who said, "Can I talk to you about?" And I said, yes,
Yeah.
yes, 100%, please.
Yeah.
I'd like to talk about that role. And I was lucky enough that, and during the process, it just reaffirmed to me that I really wanted to do the role. It's a really good organisation. It was the product of two charities, smaller charities that merged together. My predecessor did an excellent job in bringing those two organisations together, and it had a great team of people who were really up for the challenge and really hungry for growth, so that we could have more impact for people with bowel cancer and their friends and family. So there was nothing there that I didn't just love, and I really wanted to become part of the team.
Okay, so because you said I really wanted that job, I'm so glad I went through it, etc. You've said that a few times when it's come to taking roles on. So was it this team coming together, this merger that was driving that feeling, or what else?
No, I think the charity was in good heart and good health. So this wasn't an organisation in any trouble or difficulty. It was an organisation with masses of potential. And if you look at comparable charities for site-specific cancer, single cancer charities like breast cancer, prostate, whatever, they are 10 times the size of Bowel Cancer UK, at least. And it's the fourth most common cancer. It's the second biggest cancer killer. Why? Why is it so small compared to the other charities? And that's what absolutely piqued my interest. Is it stigma? Is it because it's hard to talk about, because it's poo and it's bottoms and bowels and things like that? And I thought, I've got some background here that might be helpful. I suspected it would be a bit about that, but not entirely about that. And so it was just such a compelling cause, such an area of, with a great charity that I felt was having a remarkable impact with very little, but huge opportunity for growth.
Okay. And then you take this role in 2020. And something's about to happen in the entire world. It's going to change everything. Yeah. So it's COVID. Within 6 weeks of me starting, and that was really scary, because there's me skipping in on day one, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and raring to go, with a mandate from the board to let's grow. And actually, the opposite happened, and it was touching. We might not have survived as an organisation because our income fell off a cliff overnight. Put half the team on furlough and had to make some pretty quick decisions. So yes, it wasn't the start I'd expected, and I think weighing heavy on me was the fact that my team didn't know me. I hadn't had time to earn their trust. They didn't know whether I was up to this challenge or not, and the whole organisation was at stake, and I didn't want to be an additional source of anxiety for them in what was overnight a pretty worrying time for all of us. So in terms of my leadership, your first 100-day plan, or you go in with, and that basically gets ripped up. And actually, I got asked to speak at a conference several months later on my first 100 days. And I was like, well, that's a really easy presentation. It's basically one slide with a
with a picture of a skip on fire, basically on it. So that made me think really quickly about what the team would need from me, and I promised them, half of them were on furlough, the rest of us were working from home. If you know it, if I know it, you will know it. So I'm not going to be behind closed doors hatching plans that you need to worry about. We're going to communicate all the time. We're going to keep in touch. We're going to be honest. We're going to talk about the numbers every single week, how the money's coming in, how we're managing. And so I did that. And then we thought also, what can we do to look after people's well-being while they're at home? And initially we thought it was going to be 6 weeks, didn't we?
Yeah.
And it really wasn't.
Flatten the curve.
Yes. Yeah. So I think in that time, it was clear that we were going to have to make redundancies, and that's heartbreaking. And lots of organisations went through that.
Yeah.
And so the questions that kept going around in my head was, what am I going to look back on in 6 months' time and think, if only I'd thought of that, if only I'd, thought that bit through. And that sort of haunts you a bit, it's what keeps you awake at night. Are we doing the right thing by the community? Are we going to survive, basically, bottom line. And then I sort of turned it on its head and I thought, okay, so it can't all be downside. There must be an opportunity here if I can just see it. And I think the opportunity was to start from scratch and think through, what does the bowel cancer community need now, and will they need over the next 2 or 3 years? Don't think further ahead than that right now. And how can our structure deliver that? And because we're so small, it's not a case of losing a post here or a post there. We had to start from scratch. And although I reduced the staff team, we did create 14 new roles, which helped us to build back and out the other side. And the following year we exceeded our target by 25%, the following year by 20%. So we were able to grow ourselves out and beyond, which was great. But that's the thing. I think if you suddenly find yourself in a crisis, going back to my earlier advice, prepare. Well, we were probably half a day ahead in terms of everything that decisions we needed to take. And then what's the opportunity? Where's the silver lining?
Yeah.
There will be one if you can find it. And then, again, I mentioned this earlier, but my fundraising director said in that time, if we keep the needs of our community front and centre in our decision making, they will come with us. And they did. So we're hugely grateful for that. And it reminds you, doesn't it, that in the voluntary sector, we're values driven and we're purpose led, and sometimes you're there because of the support that you can offer to your beneficiaries, and sometimes that's a two-way street, and that was one of those moments.
No, I can definitely see that. There's a few things in that. The first thing I'd say is people often associate a CEO role with a level of loneliness. There's only one of them in the organisation.
Yes.
And I guess things got darker and lonelier at no time other than the COVID time. It was that was the worst. How did you feel at that stage, particularly new into an organisation?
Well, that's a really good question. And I battled through it on my own to start with. But actually, there are other chief execs out there, and they are an amazing source of support and network. And there's a slightly funny story. It wasn't funny at the time.
No, right.
Slightly funny story about in COVID, we were all allowed to go out for a walk, weren't we, for an hour a day?
Yes, that's right.
And I was on my local common, and the paths are not wide.
Yeah.
They don't allow for 2 metres, which is what we're all trying to do. So people started weaving new paths through the thickets and the undergrowth and the trees and stuff. And I came across another chief exec of another charity coming the other way through this thicket. And so we stopped, quite surprised to see each other, 2 metres apart. And it was like, how's it going? Oh dear, and how's it going for you? Oh gosh, yeah. And then as we kind of went our ways, she just called over her shoulder, remember, Jen, it's cash that kills you. I was like, oh. And that's another thing. Always remember that.
Yes.
It's really important. But yes, there are people out there who remarkably, and I think this in the voluntary sector, generous with their time and their expertise, and there is a peer support network there. There are organisations like NCVO and Akivo as well. And, you have your trustees, your board of trustees, a remarkable source of support. And my trustees back then were amazing.
Right.
And they rolled their sleeves up and they supported us with what we did. And I was so grateful at the time, because we all went through COVID, right? And I was actually, because of the trustees, I was so grateful that I was going through it with them, because they really supported me as a new chief exec.
COVID, clearly it was this dark time, difficult time, but a lot of organisations kind of repivoted and refocused as a result of COVID, often to the future betterment of the organisation. Is that the case with Bowel Cancer UK?
Yes,
yeah,
I would say so. And pivot was the word, wasn't it? We were using then, and we had to. Everything went online. The way we supported people, engaged with people, went online. Some of that has changed since, but I think even just practical things like we all had Microsoft Teams, but had never really gone into any trouble to really, get. And then all of a sudden we had to.
Yes,
and that's made a big difference to us. I think then also thinking through what our future strategy was going to be was really important, and it focused us as an organisation. So I think it was really difficult, but we came out of it stronger. And I think the other thing as well, which was interesting for me, was that we proved that lots of jobs that would have been done in our office in Kennington before COVID could be done in a number of locations, and that opened up a whole pool of talent for us all over the UK that wasn't predicated all on the job offer, because you can be in Kennington in South London for 5 days a week. And I think I came out of that thinking that's not what's important. It's not important to me to have people sitting in rows doing their emails in one place. It's the quality of work that we're doing, and that brings with it its own challenges about how you support people, particularly early in their career, that we're all, I think, still thinking through, and there's more that we could do to be better at that. But the organisation came out of it with this great pool of talent from from all over the UK.
Yes. Okay. Good. And of course, the whole screening part of Bowel Cancer UK is so important. And funnily enough, the last person sat in that chair is part of the screening programme, as am I. So it really has reach out there in terms of what you're doing.
Yes, in terms of the bowel cancer screening programme, we were delighted. I mean, some of the policy work that you do feels a little bit dusty and behind closed, behind doors, and technical, and nice appraisals. What is that, and so on. And some of the bits of work that you do have a very long tail. So we've campaigned for a number of years to bring the age of the screening programme down to 50. It was at 60, and again, you take the evidence is there that it's beneficial from 50, and you keep plugging away at it. And so we got screening from 50 in England this year, which was just wonderful. Scotland's been doing it for a little while. They've been doing it for a number of years. Northern Ireland's not quite there yet, and and Wales. And of course, because health is devolved, we work in all 4 nations. And the next battle will be about improving the sensitivity of the screening programme. And we're working, I say battle, that's the wrong word to choose, because we work really closely with the NHS in all 4 nations to optimise the screening programme even further. And to do it in a safe way, in a way that means that they can manage the demand. Because if you spike demand, that's irresponsible and it doesn't help anybody, least of all patients.
Yes. Okay. Fabulous. Okay, Genevieve, thank you for sharing your time today. I've got one final question, which is, you've talked us through this wonderful career of yours with all these different sort of aspects to it and different challenges and different experiences. What advice would you give to somebody who may be sitting in a charity right now and thinks, maybe I'd like to lead my own charity one day,
Yes.
But I don't see the way through, I don't feel I'm particularly being talked to about those opportunities. What advice would you give?
Don't put limits on yourself. So when I started, I talked about wanting to be a pilot, and there wasn't a route to be a pilot at that point.
It's ridiculous, isn't
for
it?
me. I've since had a few little flying lessons. Though.
Have you?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Brilliant. But don't put limits on yourself. So when I was starting out, chief execs of charities didn't come up through the press office. They didn't come up through that route. They were former finance directors. They were operations and services directors. And now, it is possible to come up through that route. So even if you can't see it right now, don't assume that it'll always be like that. So don't limit yourself to start with. Secondly, I think it's find your groove. So for me, I thought it might be journalism. That wouldn't have been right for me, but it was using a similar skill set that, when I came into communications, that felt right for me, and in the voluntary sector. So do what you're good at and what you love, because it will take you a long way. Stick your hand up and say, shall I do that? Because the most amazing things happen when you do, when you have, and sometimes, that can be scary. And I think the other thing I've learned is it's good to do something that scares you a little bit every now and again. Don't be reckless with balconies and stuff, that, but just put yourself out of your comfort zone every now and again, and that really helps. And then third, I can think of all the people who've helped me and supported me and guided me over the years. And they will be there for you too if you would like to do this. And ask for help and support. Reach out to people like me. There's LinkedIn there, and just say, this is what I'd like to do. What's your advice? How can you, what do I need to do to get there? That advice I got for the job I didn't get, that feedback, that really helped change my mindset in terms of how I was going for that role. And so I'm really grateful for that. And I think a lot of people feel disappointed and kind of move on, but there's a gift there, and there's a real nugget for you if you ask for it. And I think you'd say, as recruiters, you'll always provide feedback if people ask for it.
Yes, I think one of the frustrations is not getting proper feedback sometimes.
Yes.
And sometimes people don't want to let people down and are not free with the advice, and actually what they feel about somebody not getting a role. But it's so important, as you say. That's how we change and improve and build back better.
Yeah. And it's just, this role, I still get a thrill every time I say, I'm Chief Executive of Bowel Cancer UK. I can feel, you can see it on my face. Yeah. It's such a privilege to be in a leadership role like this and to work with the team that I do, and to do some of the things that you get to do. So if anybody listening to this podcast series thinks, I'd like to try this, then just go for it, because there's no job like it.
And life is short.
That's absolutely right. Yeah.
Genevieve, what a great place to leave this conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences, and most importantly, your passion about the work you do. It's been fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Inspiring Working Lives, the Morgan Hunt podcast, driving positive change and helping you to grow your career. If you've enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next inspiring conversation. For more insights, opportunities, and updates, head to morganhunt.com.